Whack-a-mole. Come on. Well, I just have to say, though I'm not authentically a female, last night was incredible. Anybody who was here, we had authentic one night. It was awesome. Pastor Penny and all the leaders, they shared. It was powerful. We had fun, games, all that stuff, a lot of life change. So it was awesome. You saw some snippets of the I Fought statements. We played that song, Fight Song, and got to hear, or see rather, some great testimonies in just a few words of women who have fought and overcome something. And it was just a powerful statement. So thank you all for who participated in that. It was a great night. So as you saw in the bumper there, we are kicking off a brand new series called Whack-a-Mole. Has anyone ever played that game? Come on. You just put the coins in and they start popping up and you got to whack them. Well, it's all about what do you do with the unexpected things in life. That's what we're going to talk about. But before we dive into that, I just want to one more time plug life groups. You've got to get in life groups. Sign up tonight right after the service in the lobby. Also, Get on Track is happening next Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we dive into this, if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 13. Put your finger on verse 24 because we're going to read there in just a moment. Tonight, kicking off this series, I have the awesome privilege and pleasure of doing that. I'm so excited. Thank you. Don't we have some of the best pastors in the world? Come on, let's give it up for Pastor Troy and Penny. Pastor Troy will be speaking tomorrow, so I look forward to hearing his version of this. It's going to be awesome. So as we talk about things that pop up in life, I have a little disclaimer. I'm from Alabama, and while you may not hear it too much, maybe in the accent, certain words here and there, I admit that we had our own version. I didn't realize it until thinking through this message. See, we would go to my grandparents' house in Grand Bay, Alabama, where I grew up, and we would go fishing at the pond. We would take the fishing poles, some worms, tackle, whatever, and just fish, the back 40 in the pond. And we would notice these little things popping up. They were turtle heads. And being the young Alabamian boys that we were, if you've heard me speak before, I referenced this, we owned pellet guns. And so we viewed this as an opportunity for target practice. I don't condone that. I now realize after Pastor Michael's like, hunt. He's from Louisiana. They have turtle soup. We just shot them just because for target practice, and I don't condone that. I feel really bad now. But the last few times I preached, I realized maybe I had some pent-up aggression as a kid, but I think I was just the context of my environment. But all right, you guys you're excited to be here, at least the front row. So, turtles, it's all it took, Pastor Joel, turtles and a pellet gun. So we viewed it as an opportunity. They would pop up and we would try to shoot them. No intention, no way to get them, but just target practice. And so I realized we had our own redneck version of whack-a-mole. It was called Papa Turtle. So whack-a-mole is an amazing game, and it really can depict life. You show up to life, you put the coin in, you grab the mallet, and you know something eventually is going to pop up. That's life. It happens. And so we're going to talk about what do you do? How do you handle the things that just pop up? For you, maybe it's the bill that you didn't expect. You go to the mailbox, there it is. What do I do with that? Maybe it's the coworker at work that you thought was going to help take some pressure off, but instead they add pressure. They add weight. Maybe it's the family member that goes crazy, that you get that phone call of, well, Uncle Bobby's done it again. Whatever it is, your child comes home and says, hey, I'm pregnant. What do? You go to the doctor, you get the regular exam and find out, man, I've got cancer. What do you do with the things that pop up in your life? You find out maybe that your college funding isn't going to come through like you thought it would. All unexpected things in life that you're not prepared for. What do we do when we face those situations? Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to look at the parable of the tares because I believe we can learn some lessons from that. So let's look at Matthew 13, verse 24 through 30. This is a parable that Jesus used to teach, and this is what it says. Another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, an enemy has done this. The servant said to him, do you want us to then go and gather them up? But he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. See, here's a parable. It's an analogy that Jesus used for us to learn and for his disciples and his listeners of that day to learn a lesson. And I believe that we can learn 3 specific lessons from this, because the farmer expected a good harvest, but unexpectedly, there were tares in the field. So you may be asking a very valid question, what is a tare? Well, I want you to look at this picture, because a tare is a weed that looks exactly like wheat. It's the same color, it's the same texture, the same look, the same fragrance. The only difference, a tare does not produce any fruit. It does not produce any grain. It takes up space, it takes up energy, it takes up soil and nutrients, but it offers nothing in return. That's what a tare is. And it's just like this with moles in our life. We have things that pop up that require energy and effort and people and stuff, and things happen, and it requires and it sucks the life out of us, but it offers nothing in return. But what do we do in return? See, when it comes to moles in our life, we can see that they require all this, but we have to figure out, what do we do with them? So let's learn 3 lessons from this parable, from this farmer in Matthew 13. The first lesson that we need to learn, how to deal with the unexpected, is we must be alert. See, in verse 25, what happened? It says, while men slept. While men slept, the enemy slipped in, planted tares among the wheat. That wasn't planned. That wasn't expected. Someone had a job and they fell asleep on the job. They were not alert and awake, ready. We have to be the same way. We have to be alert and vigilant. See, 1 Peter 5, verse 8 says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. The 2 words that Peter uses there, sober and vigilant. Sober means self-controlled. Vigilant means watchful, alert. We must be self-controlled, watchful, alert, unless we fall asleep on the job, just like these men who were supposed to be guarding the field. You find it also in the Old Testament, a command to be alert. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9 and verse 23, this is the Message translation. It says, just make sure you stay alert. Make sure you stay alert. Keep close watch over yourselves. Don't forget anything of what you've seen. Don't let your heart wander off. Stay vigilant. There's that word again. Stay vigilant as long as you live. Teach what you've seen and heard to your children and grandchildren. Verse 23, he emphasizes once again. So stay alert. Don't for a minute forget the covenant which God, your God, made with you. And don't take up with any carved images, no forms of any kind. God, your God, issued clear commands on that. See, we must be alert. If we're going to find the moles in our life, if we're going to inspect our lives, we have to be alert. We can't fall asleep. And sometimes, honestly, the biggest area, the area where the enemy would like to slip in and that we fall asleep, is areas of strength, areas of giftedness. It's where we are strong naturally. And the enemy would love for us to just be lulled to sleep in that area, and he slips in without us even realizing. We must be alert. See, our gift can make us lazy. Our area of strength, if left attended, unattended, it can become a blind spot, allowing the enemy to slip in. But here's the good news. While we have responsibility to stay alert, the good news is that we have a helper, God. He never falls asleep. The Bible tells us in 2 Chronicles 16:9, God is always on the alert, constantly on the lookout for people who are totally committed to him. God is not looking for an opportunity to trip you up. God is not looking for an opportunity to slip tares into your field or to allow moles to come into your yard, into your life and pop up. God's not looking, but we do have to be aware of the fact that there is an enemy that is wanting to slip in and sow those things. So what do? The second lesson we can learn is that while the enemy may cause the problem, we can always learn from it. God doesn't cause the problem. God doesn't cause the mole to pop up in our life. But we can learn from this. In Matthew 13, looking at that parable again, let's look at verse 25. It says, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. And the farmer, the master, in verse 28 was very clear. He said, an enemy has done this. See, I believe every problem that the enemy throws at us is just an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to get better. Failure is never final. You may have faced areas of life where maybe you fell asleep. Maybe you weren't as watchful and vigilant as you should have been. Guess what? Welcome to the club of humanity. We have all done that. But here's the good news. Failure is not final. You have an opportunity to take the test again. You have an opportunity, just like at Chuck E. Cheese, to walk up and put another coin in the game, grab the mallet, and just get ready to whack-a-mole. Proverbs 24:16 encourages us in that same principle. It says, a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again, but the wicked shall fall by calamity. See, the thing that we have to learn, the lesson we have to learn, is that just because we fall, doesn't mean we can't get back up. Just get back up better than you were before. Learn the lesson and get up better. Get up changed. How do we do that? How do we get better? We inspect. We think about. We ponder, how can I learn this lesson? We inspect our lives. So the first lesson, we must be alert. Second lesson, the enemy may cause the problem, but let's learn from it. Let's get better. Third lesson that we can learn from this parable is we can't expect what we don't inspect. We can't expect what we don't inspect. See, in verse 27 of this parable says, so the servants of the owner came and said to him, sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? The farmer in the parable was questioned on this, and he knew exactly how to answer. Why? Because he expected a good harvest. How could he expect a good harvest? Well, he was familiar with his ground. He was familiar with the soil, the condition thereof. He was familiar with the seed he had sown. He knew what to expect because he had already inspected it. So it wasn't necessarily his fault. It was the men who had fallen asleep on the job, but nonetheless, he inspected it and knew exactly what was going into his ground. We too have to be that aware. See, I feel like we need to be like that kid. You know the kid that asks why about everything? Do some of you have that kid? Yeah? So I worked in daycare. I was like a junior, senior in high school at our church school that I grew up, going to in Alabama. And I worked in our daycare after school hours while my mom was still working at the church there. And so I had a lot of experience with kids, and I've run into these kids, that kid that is just why? It doesn't matter the answer you give. So it could be as simple as, classic, why is the sky blue? Well, because light reflects off the water molecules in the sky, and it shows different hues of color. Well, why? Well, because light is just a really condensed version of a rainbow, which is made up of the colors Roy G. Biv. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv. Okay, why? Well, those are the colors that God chose. Why? Because God has a neighbor named Roy. I don't know. Maybe it's just convenient. Roy G. Biv, So the kid, they'd say, why? 1,000 times over. Why? Because One of the most powerful questions we can ask is to be like that kid and just say, why? Why is this happening in my life? Why does this keep happening in my life? Why am I not seeing the results I want to see in my life? Why am I not seeing the fruit that I want to see in my life? Why? 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 That's not a bad question. It actually means that we're inspecting our life so that we can expect the right fruit, the right result. In Mark 13:27, they asked the farmer, and his response was, I know exactly what's going on because I've inspected this thing. See, I think there's a principle that maybe you want to write down, and it's simple. If you value something, you inspect it. If you value it, you inspect it. Before you buy a home, inspection. Every year, you take your car, inspection. It has to meet certain standards. Annual physical, inspection. You got to make sure things are working like they should be. You get things inspected. To test the value of something, jewelry or diamonds, what do? To assess the value, you inspect it. And I believe that if we value our life and our influence, we should inspect some key areas. So we've learned 3 lessons. Be alert. Even though the enemy may cause things, learn from it. Don't expect what you don't inspect. And now I want to dig into 5 areas, 5 simple things, 5 areas that we need to inspect. Because if we value our life, and I think we all would say, I value my life, I want to be an influence for the Lord, I want to fulfill the calling that's on my life, then let's be sober, vigilant, aware enough to inspect some key areas. The first area is that I must inspect my mind. I must inspect my mind. Stop. Pause long enough to figure out, some of you thought I was saying like, stop, don't write. Stop. Pause long enough to figure out what's going on in my mind. What's really the temperature of my inside, my thought life? What's going on? What are you focusing on? What's the conversation like in your head? We all have self-talk. We all have an ongoing conversation with ourselves and about ourselves. And what's that self-talk for you? See, we need to have regular thought life checkups. We need to constantly be inspecting our mind. What are we thinking about? And don't ignore the little thoughts that creep up, whether throughout the day. Maybe it's about your marriage, about your job, about yourself, that are negative. The Bible says to take every thought captive. Don't ignore those thoughts. Those could be little subtle moles that the enemy's wanting to infiltrate your world. Recognize them and the fact that the enemy is wanting to influence and do something about it. See, I believe our minds are where the moles do their most damage because our mind is such a powerful tool from the Lord. Our thoughts, our actions, our words, our entire well-being, this has been scientifically proven, our entire well-being is impacted by the condition of our mind. I want to share a story with you. I was doing a little research for this and came across a really amazing story of a man that through the power of his mind was able to survive. This story came from a doctor named Kenneth Kamler. He's climbed Mount Everest 6 times. And he tells the story and really the power of the mind-body connection related to a man who was on one of his trips on Mount Everest. And it was a surprise windstorm that made the escape impossible for several climbers stranded near the peak. And Kamler, this doctor, was located at Camp 3, which is a little lower down the mountain, and he's the only doctor in the group. Well, Kamler told the tale of a man named Beck Weathers who had fallen in his climb. He had fallen alone in the snow and stayed that way, unable to move for more than 1 day in the snow alone. Weathers he even heard other climbers pass him by on the way down to camp. People look at him and say, he's dead. He heard this, but he was out of it. Somehow, as he laid there, people passing by, thinking he's dead, he thought of his family. And somehow, he mustered the will to get up and climb down back to camp. He arrived with frostbitten hands that were a startling white color. His cheeks had black patches of necrosis, which is death of tissue on his face. But the moral of the story and the actual end is the fact that he survived. He made it back to camp. Why? Because it started with a simple thought about the people he loved and the fact that he wanted to survive, the fact that he wanted to live and make it. He made it back to camp. Why? The power of the mind. So even the body, that's how powerful it is. The body will even respond to that. And that's why I believe Paul tells us so strongly. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Many of you have heard this before. He says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report. If there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Because what we think about determines the direction of our life. It can determine our ability to survive or not, to live or to die. See, the truth is our mind follows and determines the direction of our mouth. Our mouth follows our mind. So after we inspect our mind, I believe the second area that we need to inspect, write this down, is I must inspect my mouth. Inspect my mouth. Proverbs 18:21 tells us death and life are in the power of the tongue. Those who love it will eat its fruit. I think we need to, as we inspect our mouth, we need to ask a simple question. What fruit do we want? Because the Bible says we will eat the fruit of it. We will eat the fruit of our lips, the fruit of our mouth. So what kind of fruit do you want? What kind of fruit do I want? And how are we, if you will follow this analogy, how are we farming with our words? Am I planting seeds of life or of death, of blessing or of curses with my mouth? We've got to inspect those things. Am I encouraging those around me or am I discouraging them? See, moles can be very subtle. And I believe our words can be tunnels by which we release moles into other people's lives. I'll say that again. I believe our words can be tunnels by which we release moles into other people's lives. What does that look like? Simple. It doesn't have to be cussing someone out at the drive-thru or, some big demonstrative display. It could be as simple as gossip or sarcasm or maybe just joking a little too far. And it gets into like cutting someone down to make yourself look better. We've all done these things at different times, but it's subtle ways that moles can slip in and we actually can impact someone else's life in a very powerful way. What are we doing with our words? For death or for life? See, when it comes to our mouth, Jesus calls it like it is. In chapter 6, verse 45 of Luke, Jesus is talking and he tells us, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. See, what comes out of our mouth is indicative of the condition of our heart. Therefore, it reveals the kind of person that we are. And that's what Jesus tells us. It's really simple. Good man or woman, good treasure in the heart, you bring forth good. Evil man or woman, evil treasure, it brings forth evil. I didn't say it, Jesus said it. Don't get upset with but it's that black and white. It's that cut and dry. It's either good, what we're speaking, or it's evil. We must inspect our mouth. What's Jesus' point? We're to use our words the way he did, to encourage, to edify, to correct, and to instruct. That's how we should use our words. So, since our mouths are connected to our hearts, I believe the third area we need to inspect is our motives. I must inspect my motives. So, a little confession, motives for me are like the top of my dresser. I'm waiting for I got a chuckle out of my wife. I knew that would happen. So, I'm a clean person. I mean, look at me. I cleaned this up for you guys under here. No, I'm a pretty clean person. My wife and I, we like to keep things pretty nice and tidy around the house. Thankfully, we're on the same page there. There's not too much tension when it comes to that, except for one area. The top of my dresser. It has this knack for just collecting stuff. I don't get it. I don't know what happens. It's just change and business cards and conference bracelets and books and just all this stuff. And all it takes is my wife asking one simple question. It goes something like this. So when are you going to clean off the top of your dresser? And any wives ever asked that question before? Yeah, my wife, she'll be starting a dresser life group for, I'm kidding. It takes just that one simple question, and I become a 4-year-old, and I'm like, well, when are you going to stop cleaning off the top of your dresser? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, Clint. Bad comeback. I'll clean it off sometime, babe, I promise. So let's be honest, none of us really like to be questioned on our motives. None of us, that's how motives are for me. They're like my top dresser. It's a little touchy. Like, don't mess with my dresser. It's where I keep my random collection of things that I don't need. But that's how our motives are. If we're honest, we're a little sensitive when it comes to questioning our motives. We must first inspect our motives. Let's develop the valuable discipline of inspecting our motives. Proverbs 21 verse 8 is very clear. I love the Message translation. It says, mixed motives twist life into tangles. Pure motives take you straight down the road. I want to read that again. Let that sink in. Mixed motives twist life into tangles. It's like spaghetti. It just gets all, you can't tell where it starts, where it ends. But pure motives take you straight down the road. See, there's a true story happened in Miami. Kind of helps illustrate this point. So in Miami, they have palm trees everywhere, as you probably have seen on TV or been there personally. Well, there were 6 large palm trees along the side of the highway. And they were the perfect setting, perfect context for this billboard that was right behind it. It was like beautiful. You drive down the highway, you see palm trees, billboard. The billboard said Fly Delta, just random little detail for you. Well, vandals cut down these 6 palm trees. They were large. They were 15 to 20 feet tall. Vandals came, cut them down. And so the city is like, we don't know what we're going to do. These aren't cheap trees. They're like $1,000 a piece. So this is around a $6,000 plus, maybe for labor, whatever, expense to replace these. Well, out of nowhere, the city of Miami received a donation. It was amazing. Someone donated 6 brand new palm trees, 35 feet tall. So these are taller, better than before, way more expensive. So they were like, awesome. I don't know if they were Christians, but they probably said, praise God. We're going to plant these palm trees right where the other ones were cut down. So they did that. The only problem is the new ones were 35 feet tall, whereas before they were 15 to 20. And so now, if you're driving down the highway, you can't see the billboard. Guess who bought the palm trees and donated them? U.S. Airways. No more Fly Delta. True story. See, a good act, ripple effect. They're like, we got this cheap advertising. $6,000, take out the competitor. A good act isn't always rooted in good motives. We must inspect our motives. Why am I doing what I'm doing? 1 Corinthians 11, verse 28 says, examine your motives. Again, this is the Message translation. Examine your motives. Test your heart. Come to this meal in holy awe. Paul is talking about coming to communion, coming to worship. And before doing so, examine your motives. Examine your heart. See, in life, we must test our motives. I believe we could ask ourselves many questions, but here's a few examples. Am I looking for God's approval or for man's approval? Am I putting myself first or the needs of others first, like the Bible instructs? Do I want to be known for someone who lifts others higher, or am I going to be known for someone who lifts myself higher? What are my motives? What do I want to accomplish? We must inspect that. So we've inspected our mind, our mouth, our motives. The fourth area we must inspect is I must inspect my circle. This speaks of relationships, your sphere of influence. I must inspect my circle. See, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 13:20, he who walks with the wise will become wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. Our relationships determine our outcome. I believe that now more than ever. Having been in church all my life and now working at Freedom House for quite some time, I've seen the fruit of this. Relationships determine our outcome. That's why life groups are vitally important. You've got to surround yourself with the right people. Why? Because Proverbs doesn't say, well, let me start with what it does say. It does say, he who walks with the wise will become wise. But it doesn't say, he who walks with fools will become foolish. It says, he who walks with fools will be destroyed. That's a very different outcome. So if you want to be wise, walk with the wise. But if you want to be destroyed, go ahead and surround yourself with fools. Pastor Troy threw me a little nugget in preparing for this. He said, this little quote is pretty awesome. If you surround yourself with clowns, don't be surprised if your life is a circus. Just saying. I thought that was pretty good. See, here's the truth. We've all seen someone that we know and love very deeply. Maybe it's a family member, a friend, a loved one who they started out on the right path. They were serving God, maybe going to church, maybe in a life group, maybe, I don't know, reading their Bible. They had the right circle around them. But at some point, they chose to disconnect from that circle and surrounded themselves with others, maybe companion of fools. Maybe they surround themselves with the wrong influences. And we've all seen the fruit of that. Let's not be that person. Let's remain vigilant. Let's remain aware. Let's be aware of the fact that moles want to come into our sphere of influence, our relationships. Let's choose wisely who we surround ourselves with. Why? It determines the outcome of our life. It determines our destiny. It determines the condition of how we live. So let's inspect our circle. And last but definitely not least, the fifth area that we need to inspect after our mind, our mouth, our motives, and our circle is I must inspect my faith. I must inspect my faith. 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5, again, love this in the Message translation. It says, test yourselves to make sure you are solid in the faith. Don't drift along taking everything for granted. Give yourselves regular checkups. You need firsthand evidence, not mere hearsay, that Jesus Christ is in you. Test it out. If you fail the test, do something about it. See, we must make sure that we are solid in our faith. And sometimes it's not even the quality of our faith. Let's be honest, we're human. We have days where, man, we are solid and strong in our faith in Jesus, and maybe a mole pops up, an unexpected circumstance pops up, and it shakes us a little bit. That's all right. The Bible tells us just a mustard seed, faith the size of a mustard seed is all that you need. The question is, who's the object of your faith? If Jesus is the center and the foundation of your faith, you're in good hands. Even if it's a small amount of faith you have, put that in Jesus. We must give ourselves regular checkups to make sure our faith is solid. Maybe to unpack this a little bit, let's look at Hebrews 11, verse 1. I don't think they're going to have it on the screen, but many of you have heard this pretty simple definition. The writer of Hebrews tells us faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I believe that we need to give ourselves personal faith checkups, because we just read in Corinthians, it says, give yourselves regular checkups. So how do we give ourselves a checkup regularly in our faith? Well, these are just three simple questions that that I wrote down that might help you, and you may even think of others, but if you would, jot these down, and I'm going to unpack them as we go. The first question I believe you can ask yourself to give yourself a faith checkup is, do I feel hopeful or hopeless? In whatever situation you find yourself right now today, do you find that you're hopeful or hopeless? Why do I ask that question? Well, because faith gives substance to hope. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. And so if you have faith, you will have hope. You will find the substance of hope in your life. If you find that, man, I'm hopeless, I'm desperate, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, then maybe that's an indication that your faith tank is a little low. That's okay, but be aware so that you can do what it says. You can do something about it. The second question, is there evidence of Christ in my life? That verse says you need firsthand evidence, not hearsay. You need firsthand evidence that Jesus is in you. So ask yourself, is there evidence? If people in my life took an honest assessment of how I live, would they see Jesus in me? The way I talk, the way I act, my attitude, the shows I watch, the people I hang out with. Is there firsthand evidence that Jesus Christ, the Lord of all the earth, is in me? Again, if the answer is, I'm not sure, no, that's okay. Be honest and then do something about it. The third question that we need to ask ourselves for that faith checkup is, am I believing today for more than I see right now? I'm going to say it again because I want you to be able to write it down. Am I believing today for more than I see right now? Why do I ask that? Because Hebrews 11, in the definition of faith, biblically, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. If I have faith that is active and alive in my life, I should be believing for more than I see right now. Maybe you see divorce coming your way, but do you have faith for what you can't see? Reconciliation. Maybe you see bankruptcy coming your way. Do you have faith to see beyond what you see right now? Can you believe for more than what you find in front of you? See, in Mark, actually, chapter 11, verse 22 through 24, Jesus gives us a huge lesson. It says, Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God. For assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. So Jesus is saying, pray, speak in faith, not doubting. So maybe you see a mountain. Maybe you see a circumstance that's beyond your control. Maybe you see moles infesting your yard, your life. Jesus says, that's okay, I'm with you. Just do what I said. Have faith in God, pray, speak, not doubting, believing that the mountain has to be cast into the sea. As we wrap up, I just want to remind you of the few things we've learned. The 3 lessons. We've got to be alert. Just because the enemy causes a problem, maybe we fall, maybe we fail. It's all right. Learn from it. Third, we can't expect what we don't inspect. And therefore, the 5 areas we need to inspect: our mouth, our motives, our mind, mouth, motives, circle, and our faith. And maybe you're here and you say, man, my faith, you were asking those questions, and that's a little shaky for me. I'm not sure how I would answer that. I don't know that my faith is completely in God. I'm facing some things that, man, they've shaken me up. Or maybe you would say, man, I've surrounded myself with people that I'm not on that straight path anymore. I've allowed them to pull me aside. You know, the most fundamental inspection of faith is a simple question of, is Jesus leading my life? Is he the Lord of my life? Have I surrendered to him and received the free gift of salvation and forgiveness and a new identity, a new life? If you would, just close your eyes, bow your head right where you are.